Some they call it functional alcoholism, but if you know anything about Ben, he's got vision with precision, microphones and a tinkle of derision. You're about to hear what beer can be. It's time for Barley and Me.
Welcome to Barley and Me. I'm your host, Ben Rice. This is episode 125. We're here today in Alameda, California at Admiral Malting, a video episode. It's been so long. We had this thing scheduled, a year and something ago? With us today, we've got Ron Silberstein from Admiral Malting. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks.
Good to hear.
Thanks for coming in.
And from right next door at Almanac Brewing, we've got our special guest. It's Phil Emerson, brewer at Almanac Brewing.
Hello, everybody.
How's it going?
Real good. Not too bad.
Yeah. So we're going to do this video episode. It's going to be a few different segments. In segment one, we're going to talk about the past, where you guys come from, what you guys have been up to. And I think it's only fair to start with the home team, even though we're going to do non-baseball rules. We're going to go home team first. Ron, tell me about your history with beer and with Admiral Malting. Sure.
Well, do we have an hour or two? Or no. I'll try and be a little briefer than that. I tend to get wordy, but my original background actually is being an attorney. So I used to practice immigration law, but I always brewed beer as a hobby from back in college, that sort of thing. So in one sense, I'm one of those original people where a hobby spun out of control, and the outcome of that initially was a brewery called a brewery restaurant called Thirsty Bear Brewing Company. It's in San Francisco, and we went organic back in 2007 there, and so I've always been very interested in how are our ingredients grown, how are our crops grown, what is the impact that has on the earth, on the people that work the earth, on the people that consume that product, and that's always fascinated me. And so in 2007, when that was possible, we became a certified organic brewery, and then in about 2010, a farmer named Nigel Walker, he called me up. He had a farm called Eat Well Farms. So it's a kind of an original guy in the organic movement, and he said, "Hey, I can get you some organic barley that you can brew some beer with. What do you think?" And I'm like, "Well, that would be awesome. Except you can't just take barley and make beer from it. There's this process called malting, and it's actually pretty complicated, and no one's really doing it anymore. It's sort of in the hands of these fairly centralized multinational companies that do most of the malting in the world these days." And so, but it was also the beginning point or the birth of the craft malt movement. I'll call that just you could say small batch, you could say craft, you could say whatever you want, but it's where I think it really started with some of the farmers looking to add value to their crops, and in particular I can think of a couple in Colorado that used to grow for Coors, but they were just getting so pushed and pressed for the money anyhow. So we connected with a malting company that was in Colorado. This guy, Nigel Walker, he grew the barley for us. We sent it there, got it malted, and it came back. We did what we call a locavore ale. It was we just had gotten some hops from Hopmeister's farm. We had the barley that was here from Woodland. And so I thought, it got my mind going, and I started investigating a little more of the craft malt movement. There were maybe not even a dozen in the U.S. at that time. And that got my brain going, got me to go visit my old mentor, Dr. Lewis, who was the Anheuser-Busch endowed professor at Davis. I think the first one, really. He started the programs there. It was him and Charlie Bamforth and then Glenn Fox. And he started telling me stories about growing in the Dunnigan Hills, Hungry Hollow area, about barley that had been grown and exported to England, and what the quality of the crop was, and how the English at one point on the barley exchange revered barley that came from California. They used to call it sun-kissed because it didn't have, a lot less of a rainfall, et cetera, so that it wouldn't have the mold or the fusarium in particular on the barley. So they really liked the barley that came out of here. Now that trade sort of died around World War II with the submarine warfare,
just like the hop fields.
Well, and then after the war, because we need to know what the hell to do with all of our petroleum that we've been pulling out of the ground. And so then they started making fertilizers and pesticides and insecticides. And England got its very own fumigation. It could now fumigate for mold and all using that. So yes, everything changed all over the world. And here, I guess we started doing more rice and grapes and almonds and things like that. But that got me going. That got me thinking about it. And yeah, just then going to barley field days. It's quite an involved story, but there was nothing. There had been no malting facility here in California for probably over 100 years. But going to the UC Davis and connecting with the barley breeder there, who did other small grains, but sort of as a little more than a hobby. But just he always wanted to get it going here in California again too. So that was critical. That's where I met my business partner and our head maltster, Curtis Davenport. And I connected with Dave McLean from Magnolia Brewing Company, and I had always sort of talked about malt. He would bring containers of Maris Otter from Brantwell Farms in England, which we even went to on a field trip and we looked at. But that's sort of how it went. I would start visiting other malting facilities in England, some in the United States like Riverbend or Grouse or Colorado Maltings or these other ones. And then I went and did a course at the Canadian Malting Barley Technical Center, the CMBTC, up in Winnipeg, the home of Neil Young. And it was really cool. And that's sort of just in a uncondensed but condensed form how I got into the malting thing here.
Yeah. That reminded me, this episode is also part of Maltster Mayhem. It's malters all May here at Barley and Me. But since and that's just that's the very beginnings of Admiral Malting. We'll get back to you in a second here. But first of all, Phil, what's going on with Almanac? You guys have quite a history as well. Alameda is your first official location, but you had some unofficial locations as well.
Yeah, that's right. Hi, so I'm Phil Emerson. I'm the brewmaster here at Almanac. Been with Almanac for over 6 years. Almanac's been a brewery for 10 years, but it's only had its own brewery for 3 years. We were a contract tenant gypsy brewery hybrid where we, did our own blends of sour beer, primarily fruited beers. But then ultimately we kind of grew to a size and got to a point that we really wanted to take our future into our hands, quality. It's like having roommates, right? Like you want to know who used your dish and why they didn't wash it. So like having your own brewery is a beautiful thing because it's, you have no one to blame but yourself.
Yes.
There's nothing to hide behind. There's no excuses. So we try to make still very much the best beer we can make that's rooted in California agriculture first. That ties into having great, wonderful neighbors that you can just knock on the door and borrow a pallet of sugar or grain anytime you want.
Absolutely.
So Almanac focuses primarily on, or historically it's focused primarily on farm-to-barrel beers. Mm-hmm. That's all been California produce when possible. Pause for a cause. But these days we're actually we're producing more, hazy IPA, West Coast IPA, and Kolsch than anything. So it's been kind of a nice transition in business and, not without its hiccups, but fun to branch out and be brewing whatever style we want to brew.
Yeah, exactly. I really enjoyed you guys from the start, and it was amazing how much consistency you guys had, considering you were kind of hopping around from place to place. But the same thing happened with High Water Brewing that's now in Lodi, and I think they're only like 2 years old, having their own personal
Steve's
place.
a cool dude.
Yeah, love him. He's great. Him and Barry, wonderful. But I really am glad that you guys have your own spot, because it's just nice to be able to go down there and have one of your beers, as opposed to having to find it in the grocery store and hope.
It's never fresher than here too. That's the best part.
True.
Yeah.
And obviously you got to make those hazies and stuff, because now you've got a building you got to pay for.
Got to keep the lights on.
You can't just be making those sours, as much as they're great and like there's a good margin on them. You got to do your business stuff.
Our number one selling beer is Love. It's a hazy IPA.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Solid little beer. But we do about 50% of our volume is that one brand, and we're really proud of it.
Yeah.
Should be.
Yeah, absolutely. And for, when you're making sours, you're going to need some specialty malts, obviously. You got to get kind of funky with it, get a little weird. And like I said, keep it local where you can.
I'm wearing a shirt that we did last year with all of our friends that was made with all of Ron's malt next door. So that's definitely been fun to be able to, showcase that terroir.
Yeah. Food or friends?
Food or friends.
Food or friends.
So, Ron,
yes.
You did eventually open a malting?
We did eventually open. I mean, it was definitely a long road to hoe. In that you had to meet farmers, and so partly through the field day at UC Davis, we were able to connect with farmers. First guy I connected with was the head of the Northern California Barley Growers Association, and it's really interesting because part of this has become almost a crusade in reminding people that beer is agriculture. I mean, the perfect neighbors here of farm to barrel, and that's exactly. But it's shocking to know how many people don't even realize that beer is made from barley, malted barley. And then the malting process too. Most people are very mystified. They're like, malted milk balls, malted milkshake, malt. What the hell is malt? And really, all it is, I think it's important to clarify. It's going to be a good thing. Is that any grain can be malted,
yes.
And we malt rye, we malt oats, we malt wheat. Clearly, we sell more malted barley than anything else, but. The malting process simply takes for example, everyone knows that wine is made from grapes. But all you have to do is step on the grape, smush it. The sugars in there can ferment from the air, from the skin on the grape, from weather. Same thing with apples. Everybody knows cider is made from apples. Yeah. But if you ask people what beer is made from, fortunately or unfortunately, if they have one answer, they'll say hops. And then, but most people don't really even know it's made from a grain, and in particular from barley. And what's curious about it is that you cannot get the sugar from that grain. The starches are just too complex; they're too long. And so the whole idea of malting is to make those sugars in there, those starches, water soluble, so that Phil can take it, throw it in his mash tun. Put in water at a certain temperature that activates the enzymes that are also part of this germination process, and then he just extracts the sugars right from there. But it's wholly dependent on the malting process. It would not happen if you didn't soak, germinate, and then dry that malt.
Yes.
Drying is really more for stability, preservation, flavor, color, things like that. I mean, you could make beer out of unkilned barley, but it wouldn't taste very good.
Yeah, it'd be a little soggy feeling. I feel like that's what it would be.
Yeah, it would just be very gray. You probably couldn't get the DMS out of it. You'd probably have to boil it down to a thimbleful.
Rye ales are in the vogue right now,
Maybe we should try it. Maybe I'm just got myself in a little box here or something. But yeah, in essence, though, the kilning part is critical because it does add color and flavor, whether you want to kiln caramel or you have a very light Admiral Pilsner stuff. We call it Admiral Pils.
Yeah.
But, or even a chit malt where you just let it chit, CHIT, just where the rootlet just starts to come out, and then you dry it, and therefore it's not even close to fully modified, but it's great for haze or mouthfeel or the proteins for head retention, that sort of thing. So there's all sorts of things you can do with the malted barley, and
yeah. So I hear a lot. You've got your malted barley, like you said, but there's also flaked oat, flaked wheat. Is that a different thing, or is it just like
it's completely different? Now, if they're flaked, more often than not, it means that it's been through a roller and gelatinized, so it's gelatinized and rolled, and so the extract can come out of it, but there's no enzymes in there. And this is the critical thing, is that and it hasn't gone through that process. So it's not just enzymes, but the whole change that happens to the seed, when it's undergoing modification, when it's germinating. And so people can use that, and they do, as adjuncts. But you absolutely need the malted grains for the enzymes to break down the sugars in there, or to, it depends on the purpose that you're using the raw grains for. But yeah, some people just want it in there for haze or texture or mouthfeel or whatever. But you can get a little more stability too. For example, like in a chit malt, the manganese, it just leads to a little more colloidal stability if you use a product that's been a little bit malted as opposed to a raw grain.
All right, Ron, you've been doing a lot of talking. Let's get back to Phil.
Yeah. Sorry. I do talk too much.
We're talking about history here, and I don't think we really got your history, Phil, as a person, as a brewer. What got you excited about entering this beer industry and getting into these sours and all that fun stuff?
Yeah. So I was a home brewer back in San Diego, living above a bar called Blind Lady Ale House. Cool little bar down there. Owner is Lee Chase, phenomenal brewer from San Diego that kind of had his hand around, and so I was doing a bunch of homebrewing, and I had him as a good reference to try my terrible homebrew. But it was that good feedback about how bad it was that kept you going, and so I wound up at Davis for brewing. Got a degree in chemistry, food chemistry there, emphasizing in beer. Got to work at Sudwerk for a couple of years.
Nice. Learned
from Tom Stoll and Mike Hudson. That was a wonderful place. Jay Prawl as well to learn from. And from there, moved on to Almanac. I was hired as the barrel manager. When I started, we had about 3,300 barrels. So that was a lot to manage. We slowly transitioned into fooders over the years, and that's been the game changer for us in sours. We were an early, I would say a pioneer at least in California for sour beers. Now everyone kind of makes them, which is great. Yep. Everything has locality. Sour beers is really about terroir and locality.
Synchronized sipping.
There we go. That's perfect.
I missed mine.
So you were at Sudwerk. Tom Stoll, I've worked with a few times on the podcast. Were you there when they started transitioning to brewing sours?
Yeah, so that's actually kind of how I got my start. I was lucky enough that Mike Hudson, he had 2 barrels of funky beer, and he's like, I can't work on this. I got too much stuff to do. You want to work on it? So that was an opportunity to expand that program into about 80 barrels. At first I had to go out and try and sell the beer because nobody wanted to buy it. So it was fun as, calling on every friend I made in the industry to, would you please buy this beer so I can make more? But
it's
worked.
Really good.
Yeah.
Just please. I know it's weird.
So there's a beer that I'm really proud of from there called Funky Hot Farm. And that was sort of what kind of helped get me a job here, I think.
Yeah. I love that one.
Yeah. Cool little beer.
Spelled like Funke from Arrested Development.
Exactly. That's where it came from.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys, we've reached our time for segment 1 of this episode of Barley and Me. You want to move over next door and see what happens there?
Sounds like fun.
All right. Welcome back to Barley Me episode 125. We're here still in Alameda, but we've changed locations. We're over at Almanac Brewing now.
Yep.
Phil, tell us more. What's going on here? We're going to talk about the present of Almanac and Admiral Malting.
Well, we went from 651A to 651B. We share a wall, you can see in the very background, with our neighbors, which is amazing. So in this facility here, you can see we're actually brewing beer right now and filtering beer and fuging beer and packaging beer. It's a beer factory at all times.
Yeah.
In this last year, everyone's kind of been experiencing the pandemic. It's been weird. We were fortunate not to have to lay off any folks. We had to cut a lot of hours. We shared the brunt together. Managers cut salaries and stuff. But we were proud that we were able to keep everybody on. And we were kind of blessed in some sense that the beer world, went strictly, I think, you probably agree that you shopped a lot at the grocery store.
Yep.
First couple of months.
Can.
Totally. So that's where, that's where our business has gone the last year is almost 99% cans. Now that restrictions are lifting and people are getting more vaccinated, the numbers are getting better. Draft is coming back, but that was like the real big challenge of the last year was canning is slow for us. It's a goose. It's 8 barrels an hour. We do about 16,000 barrels a year, so you can divide the math. It's a lot of hours to have to put into a can.
Yeah. And then people are used to drinking your beer in bottles. So there's a little transition there.
So that we've been working on that for a few years. The sour in cans is pretty unique. We think we're innovators there. There may have been someone before us, but all of our beers that are sour in cans, they're all mixed culture, naturally fermented, naturally carbonated, naturally conditioned, and we think that's pretty unique to the world. Not without its drawbacks. I think people tend to save bottles. Cans have a different stigma, so it's trying to reeducate the consumer. What this beer is worth. Nothing changed in terms of ingredients except for the packaging, but sometimes cans can be, a little bit off-putting for some folks for a beer that age.
Yeah, and your bottles had that like etched feel to them.
Beautiful bottles.
Beautiful bottle, exactly.
Totally. But the art's still the same. Damien Fagan's the co-founder, original founder, CEO. He does most of our art. If not, we work with DKNG, they're great artists. So taking that sort of like vibe and that feel that he puts in the bottles, putting that in the cans. I wish I had one to show you. I should have brought one out. But good art, and that's what kind of ties it together.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And so for Admiral Malting, what are you guys doing as far as how are you guys feeling through the pandemic and things like that and get out of it?
That was interesting because it's sort of like I'd say we dropped off a cliff when the pandemic first hit. Just no one knew what the hell they were doing. And then As people shifted towards cans, that was one adjustment. And then, for example, we do sell a lot of malt to distillers. So it's all the same product. I mean, more or less, whiskey's just distilled beer. So, I think we spent most of 2020 climbing back up to where we were in February of 2020, which had been a record month. But we've been blowing by that now. People are back with a vengeance. People are digging it. It's something that was new anyway, and I think people had to become accustomed to, or we certainly have been spending a lot of time, creating a conversation around that ingredient, the malt and things like that. But we're super happy with how things are going now. We can't even malt as much as we'd like to right now, and we're adding a third floor. So
Nice.
where we used to store our barley and our packaged product, bagged. We're talking packaged.
It's packaged.
Here.
That's fine.
It's still a package.
Still packaged.
It's going to be a third malting floor. So I'm really excited about that. We're, getting our permits and stuff for that. We have a couple of, Phil's saying a couple silos back there that we get our barley in, which is really nice. And it's good too, because it keeps the product, just with little bugs or whatever. We don't get stuff coming in from the field. It's out there, outside with the silos. It's not going to get inside. And, so it's all good.
Yeah. And how are you kind of pitching your product to people that aren't using your local malts?
Well, there's different reasons that people could get interested into it. Someone might go, "Oh, I just want a local ingredient," end of story, and they're not really thinking about it much deeper. We do care about what our farmers do as far as how they grow the barley, and also that's another thing. We'd like to think that we do encourage sustainable farming, and a good 25-30% of what we sell is organic, is certified organic. So there's that element too. But someone may want to know, just like you might want to know where your peach or your cherry came from, they may want to know where did their barley come from. And we're just trying to re-engage brewers too, to know it's almost unimaginable that a vintner would ever go, I don't know where my grape came from.
Yeah.
What I get it from Welch's, man. They send me a big bag of frozen concentrate. It's not that bad, yeah. But the point being is that it's reconnecting. And Phil, I mean, we've done it over here. He's met maltsters and even the guy who bred our barley, and it's just reconnecting, because there is a conversation to be had amongst maltster, brewer, or distiller and the farmer. And so that's really fun too. And we think in general that small grains are a more sustainable thing to grow in California anyway, because of drought, because they you can dry farm them on much less rainfall a year, what pretty much grows in the Sacramento Valley. So there's a number of, whether it's you want to know where and who grew it, to you want to know your maltster, to you just want something local, or you want to, we've toll malted for people who grow their own grains. We've adjusted our malt, whether it was the first time Sierra Nevada wanted a malt for an Oktoberfest collaboration they did with Weinsteffen, and we made our first dark Munich style, or whether it's Sonoma Distilling that wanted a darker rye malt than they could typically get. So it's a lot of fun in that way.
Yeah. And then you have to turn around and sell that beer to people. And you also sell sours to people. And a lot of people are kind of turned off by that thing. What are you doing to educate consumers to make sure that they're buying your product and buying stuff that you're making with Admiral malts?
So we always try to give a shout out no matter what to Admiral whenever we use it. Absolutely. I'm a big believer in what Ron's doing. I think put your money where your mouth is, and he wears his heart on his sleeve really well about sustainability. You don't hear him brag that much, but it's organic or no-till, and that's really, really dope. It's kind of similar, thing for us is, ingredients matter. We think that's an important story to tell customers. You mentioned kind of sour beer versus fresh beer. We're always striving for balance more than anything. Is the beer's got to be drinkable. Mm-hmm. I like to tell everyone you only get one liver, so don't waste it on something you don't enjoy, right? Like, burn it on something you actually like. So balance is key, I think, to enjoying something. Is it can't be too bitter, it can't be too sour, it can't be too sweet. So with the sour beers, our Sour Nova series, that's the first thing that we canned. I really envisioned that when we made it as a gateway sour. Yeah. And it's kind of proven that way. Is, folks that like mixed culture, it's got nice Brett character, it's got nice oak, but it's not too sour. It's really balanced, and the key there is to try and get more folks into craft that weren't drinking it before.
Yeah.
Certainly does not strip the enamel off your teeth. I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's what I've always liked about Almanac, is the balance in the sour. Yeah. Just refreshing as opposed to oh my goodness, what's going on here?
Yeah, because a lot of sours, and that's the thing about getting people into sours, is that there's no real standard sour. They can be all over the map on that. So somebody might, like, I remember I brought people out to, like, you should try a sour beer, and I got this beer from the brewery that I love and adore.
Sure.
But I'm also a sour lover, and I'd forgotten just how much they had done with that thing, and it was real weird. And so they're like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what this is. I'm never going to drink a sour again. I'm like, oh no.
That's a cool experience, though, right?
Yeah.
Even if they didn't like it, but at least it's something like completely different than they've ever had.
I'm like, you know what? I'll finish this. I apologize. I should have thought about the fact that this is your first sour and not giving you. This is like a severe sour, and it's one of those ones where like you won't be able to drink another thing afterwards. I'm like, that's my mistake. Don't take it out on other sour beers. You should still drink sours.
Try more, and then graduate, because I love the brewery beers too. But you know, so work your way up.
They can get real crazy.
Sure.
But yeah, and since speaking of representation, we're drinking right now a Crispy Girl Pilsner. Was this part of the Pink Boots Society, or is it completely separate from?
No, this was our Pink Boots. We do a Pink Boots brew every year. That's called the Future is Fluid. That's using the Pink Boots hops. So we do that every year. We've done it a few times now. And that's always been with the women of Almanac, contributing every part. This year when we brewed it was in February in celebration of the Pink Boots brew, but, COVID, so we couldn't have all the women participate from Almanac. So this beer was spearheaded by Sarah B., our brewer here, and this is it's a Czech Pilsner. It's not using the Crispy Boots or the Pink Boots Crispy Boots. It's not using the Pink Boots hops. It's really just it's actually it's a fun name, right? Everyone's hearing in craft beer Crispy Boy for lagers. So this is really a stab at that and showing that women make great beer and have good taste in beer. So props to Sarah for this beer. And it's using all of Admiral's Pilsner malt.
Oh, look at that.
That's nice.
Look at that. And it also helps support charities.
It does support charities. This went to Punks with Lunch, which is a local group that helps get lunch to folks. We did a feminine hygiene drive along with it, which is pretty dope. So a lot of our beers that we brew, especially in the last year, I think folks are waking up to the power that beer can play in social justice and how it has a role. Bars have always been a place where people get together and talk about ideas.
Yeah, always. Since the foundation of the nation.
Since the foundation of beer, right? That's it. Of everything. You go to a pub in England, you'll hear people talking politics, and it's a good thing. COVID kind of erased the pub scene, so we've really doubled down, I think, on our offerings to kind of represent conversation pieces that we want to start with. And, Pride Love for us a few years ago was a big part of that.
Yep.
The Black is Beautiful initiative. So dope that Marcus started that at Weathered Souls. And so that's kind of just been like a snowball effect for us that we've seen that like you can do really good with what you were going to do anyway. So why not do it?
Right. And like it's an easy way to like here's a beer. It's completely innocuous. By the way, this beer carries like some connotations.
Totally.
That totally like will help people figure out what's going on in the world. I love beer.
If you're alienated by it, fuck you.
That's
Exactly.
as has been said on my episodes plenty of times. Like, if you're not comfortable with this conversation, you don't have to keep listening, and I'm not going to miss you. I don't make money from this podcast anyway,
Totally.
so if you're not listening, I don't lose any money.
Totally. We're not making beer for racists.
Yeah,
So same thing.
I don't drink beer with racists.
Yeah.
That's, if you don't have that on your fridge, what are you doing? But. Yeah, I really do think that's the current status of beer is making it beer with a message and beer that's made with local stuff if you can do it and it's made well. Nobody's accepting bad beer anymore. You can't do it. When you start, there's a grace period, totally. But
it kind of comes back to like food justice, right? And I think Ron's holding the ecological side down of food justice, and I think that's super important because it's a lot of things that are faceted about it, and it's great to see that someone's taking the initiative that's about organic or no-till.
Yeah. Yeah, which helps preserve everything and make sure that you have your ground ready for year round.
Well, and part of it is just that there's more soil out there than anything, even than trees. So what's in the soil is the microbiome intact, is the fungi and the bacteria in there that helps the crop grow, or does it maintain a lot higher moisture? With no-till, in particular, one of the key components is the carbon sequestration. It just sequesters ridiculous amounts of carbon in the soil. And so even the U.S. government is getting a little hip to the idea of, maybe we can pay our farmers to help sequester carbon and things like that. So they're doing some programs that encourage no-till. I mean, no-till is part of a sustainable agriculture, that includes, it could be cover crops and crop rotation. And it's just moving away from the monocrops, monolithic type things, because it's just never been healthy for anything, to be quite honest.
We're going to run out of oil before that.
That's the whole thing. The amount of fossil fuels put into our food now is just mind-boggling. And it's like I just heard actually the other day on a pod about the number of calories, if you include fossil fuels, that it takes to create a calorie. Absolutely not sustainable. So anyway, it's another podcast.
Actually, it's part of part 3. The things that we do today affect what we do tomorrow. So let's wrap up here and move on to the future of beer.
Cool.
Sounds good to me.
All right, we're back for segment 3. We're still at Almanac Brewing. Phil Emerson, Ron Silberstein.
Good place to be.
So we're going to talk about the future of beer, which we're just going to prognosticate based on current events. I think, as we were getting into in the last segment, representation is becoming a more important thing. Thank God.
Yep.
I've been making it a part of Barley and Me to make sure that as much as I can get minorities, women in beer on this thing, to let people know that it's not just people who look like me that drink beer and make beer, as far as that goes, and are involved in that. It's always been a focus of Barley and Me. So that's going to be the future of beer, I think, for sure. Let's just knock that one out.
Completely agree. Inclusion's the future.
Yeah.
That's more customers at the most, skeptical level, but it's the right thing to do regardless. That's, again, we talked about politics earlier. That's the best way to go forward.
Yeah. And they make incredible beer.
Totally.
Brewers, the people that have passion for beer will learn to make great beer if they apply themselves.
Absolutely.
Regardless of anything. I'm hoping to see a lot more people in the tap room that don't look like me. That would be great. I always appreciate when I walk in. I'm like, yeah.
That's the goal.
Go.
Yeah.
But besides that, what are we seeing? As far as that goes, I think everybody thinks next year's the year of the lager. One day.
They've been saying that every year. I don't know. I hope. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. That's certainly part of the dialogue we're trying to get involved with, because I think nothing expresses the quality of the ingredients more and in a subtle way. I'm kind of curious. We're in the hazy IPA thing. We've been through the West Coast IPA thing. Are sours on the ascendant, on the descendant? How is that going?
That's a good question.
Yeah, we're actually selling more sour beer than we've ever sold. So that's, I could say it's growing, but I could say that the growth is shrinking down. I think that's a response to folks we were talking about earlier that are making sour beer everywhere, which is a good thing, right? Sour beer is really about terroir and about locality more than anything. I think at first it was it was mystified. No one knew how to make them. And as the information gets shared, as information should be shared, right? There's nothing new under the sun. If you can make my beer better, I want to drink it. That's literally why we share information. So I think as that info got shared and people got less scared about, sours, it's like, oh, it's going to ruin your brewery. We share all of our tanks simultaneously, side by side.
Oh.
We've never had any issues in our life because it's like a kitchen, right? If the chef doesn't wash his hands, you're going to get sick.
Yeah.
We wash our hands every time.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, because it used to be, I remember a lot of cross-infection with people that are just starting into sours. They thought they had the space away or they'd done what they had to do to maintain, and it's like, oh, got cross-contamination. But now you see these sour stouts, and it's like, well, it was really
was that really supposed to be?
Was it really that bad of a deal also? I don't mind drinking the sour stuff.
I'm an older generation brewer and all that, and I remember, when I first opened Thirsty Bear Brewing Company in 1996, we made a conscious choice to have one yeast because we were so worried about, other beers having that character, etc. And I don't know. We probably use 4 or 5 right now. And it's just, and everyone. I think it's all about sanitation practice, and so that should not be a limiting factor.
I think that's the cool part about, the future of craft beer is that a lot of myths are getting disposed, right? Mm-hmm. People are like, you read it in a book. Maybe it was Michael Lewis's book that I read. Same thing, hot side aeration or something. And people are moving past what was very German style of brewing, which is wow, we have milkshake IPAs, which suck. But it's also why, we have this great, amazing expression of hops currently. It's, that you read a recipe from 30 years ago and it says 1 pound per barrel was a lot. And you're like, wait, what?
And that's of a low alpha, low everything, citrus oils, etc. But
you were talking about earlier too about ingredients being the thing, and I've seen it, and so I think it's amazing that we put it on our label, but I know everyone else. I go to the Rake. The Rake's amazing. It's next door. It's what houses Admiral. So if you want to drink their malt, go to the Rake. But it's great because all those other beers are also showcasing and saying which malts they're using. I'm seeing the exact same thing happen with hops, and people are really specializing in farms. And like, this hop I selected this lot from this farm, Carpenter Ranch or whatever it is. And I think that's, that ties back to kind of slow food California. Like, that's what Ron's doing with the malt. I can see that being the future trend is people really want to know who's making their beer. Like, know your brewer, but know your maltster, know your farmer, right? Know your hop grower. Like, people
it all
that care
makes
anyway.
a difference. It definitely makes a difference. It's just, we have to celebrate that difference, and we have to be able to convey that difference to the people. And so they don't just think all hops are equal or all barley is equal. And it's not.
Yeah. And that your taste profile is different than somebody else's. So it's something that's like, well, this is a hot hop. You don't have to like it. Like, if your taste profile is like, I don't really care for this hop, that should be not a problem. But
Sabro is one of those hops that divides people.
Yeah?
You love it or you hate it. Totally.
Okay.
A lot of brewers hate it. I love it.
I like it.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First time I had cashmere was here, actually.
Oh,
Johnny
yeah.
Cashmere.
Johnny Cashmere.
Nice.
I loved it, and I look for it now.
Like a cool green tea, apple thing going on in a fun way of a hop, which is weird to say, but it works.
It works.
I think part of the future is, again, getting better at telling your story of who you are, where you come from, and what the beer is, and educating your consumer, not in like a condescending way, which was very much a prevalent thing in the mid-aughts.
Totally.
And now it's like,
Story
hey,
of the IPA.
yeah, exactly, very condescending, and just being like, no, beer's for everybody. It is an accessible beverage. It's not for an exclusive type of person. And there's history behind every little thing.
Well, I'll go out on a limb there on the history note, in that beer, for example, Pilsners or Helles or a Blonde or a Kolsch, these all have a history for a reason, and there's a reason that people really like it, and there's a reason it resonates with people. And it's almost it's a style that's ideally selected for the ingredient to highlight those unique characteristics of that malt, of that subtle, noble hop that you're using. And so I personally am a fan of hoping that does continue to grow. I have glimmers of hope. We're definitely serving more of that over at the Rake. Phil was talking about that as far as our showcase for the beers made with our malt. And we're noticing it's working. We're not just doing hazy IPAs, and it's working. And I really enjoy those subtleties. I think that's a lot of fun, and quite frankly, it's easy to drink. And I like being able to drink more than a few beers with a friend. I don't want to be one and done.
Same. It's all about balance. I think we talked about that earlier, but I think that's the trend of the future too. If you go back 10 years ago, there were beers called palate wrecker.
Oh yeah,
right. Who the fuck wants to drink a beer that wrecks your palate? Why would you want to have two of those?
Yeah,
I think that's the future.
I did love it though.
Velvet Touch,
right?
Soft pillow beers. Beers that are more complementary to food.
And the truth is that'll bring in more people. Yeah. It's going to bring. I mean, I think craft beer has grown. We're hoping it's around 25% of what beers are sold now. I'm not quite sure it's risen to that level, but it's really close to that. And we can actually expand that by just having beers that are more accessible to people. People still enjoy something that's quality, that's excellent, but they need something that's accessible to them. And I find that in friends all the time. I go, I just drink wine. I don't drink beer. But then I start turning them on to some beers.
Yeah.
You
bring them an
all
Almanac.
of a sudden, yeah.
Then you're the pusher man.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got it. I am a pusher man.
Yeah, because in the late 90s, there were a lot of ads like, ooh, bitter beer face. And so craft beer kind of took no, bitter beer is good. And
arrogant bastard, right?
Yeah, and you had that hop war. And I think people are getting that palate fatigue that you get from those palate wreckers and things like that. And I think it's just, people are like, oh, hops are changing. There's a lot of varietals. There's a lot of experimentation with hops. That's very exciting.
It is.
And now that the craft malt world's kind of coming in, maybe that'll finally get people like, oh, yeah, malt, the flavor profile that adds, it's really important to what we're getting in depth of flavor, type of flavor. And so as people become aware that it's not just, because it's a long time, it's just 2-row malt and a bunch of hops.
Oh, people ask me all the time, what's your 2-row? Well, actually, all the barley we grow is 2-row. That's just a style of barley.
Right.
But I'll go back to, it's a little phrase that we use is that malt is the soul of beer. And it really is. I mean, no malt, no beer. You can't make beer unless you have malt. And then I'll again, back to my mentor, Dr. Michael Lewis from UC Davis, he would always say that hops is the salt on the potato.
Yes.
But malt is the potato. So, and I agree with that. I think that's absolutely
so
true.
funny. I was over talking to Peter Bocart from Purpose Brewing in New Belgium a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
Great dude.
And we had the same thing. It's like he was talking about how the Reinheitsgebot about ruined beer. Because he's like, that's like saying you can only cook with potato, meat, butter. What are you like?
What are you making?
It's like, yeah, you can make a killer meal. You can make hundreds of killer meals. But at some point, you're going to get tired of that, and you need to branch out. And so we do the same thing. Hops is the salt kind of thing. Like, it's the butter in that one.
Totally. The weird ingredient trend has been interesting, and I think some folks have pulled it off with nuance, and that's really cool. I think that's what I'm really looking for when I see something that's unique in beer. Ouzelfinch out in Virginia does a lot of the most like Wonka-sounding beer. It sounds like something Willy Wonka would make. You know, graham cracker, raspberry, something, and then you try and you're like, oh wait, but you put them all together thoughtfully. Like it's not just you didn't just throw your Halloween candy in there. Like you really tried to balance this out.
Yeah, I did a beer judging for the California Commercial Brewers thing at the State Fair, which, to be fair, I am not BJCP trained.
Sure.
But, like, let's go to celebrity beer judge. Like, I'm not that either. But they're like, we'll let you judge the experimental beers. And the old school heads were so mad that we picked this beer that was like, peanut butter, jelly, like marshmallow. I'm like, look, they put like 8 things in here. They put notes of this. There's 8 flavors in here. And I could pick every one of those flavors out. They did not muddle. They were all there individually, and I enjoyed what I was drinking.
Yeah.
It looks weird. It's thick. It's viscous. But it said what it was. And these other beers don't do that. And so that's why this one wins experimental. And everybody that was on the panel got yelled at by these old heads about, like, that's not even really beer. I'm like, it's experimental.
Yeah.
And it is what they said it was. And a lot of these beers, they're good, but they're not what they say they are. And this, having all these flavors come through, that's a sign of a good brewer, because these things should blend, and they don't. They came through as a wave of flavor. I'm like, you can't. That's technical. That's a masterpiece of beer.
That's expertise. It's something at least, right?
Yeah.
Like it's thoughtful. I think that's important. Thoughtful beer, right?
Yeah. It's like, and you cannot like the idea of pastry stouts and milkshake IPAs, but if it's done well, you don't have to like it, but you can appreciate what it was. And for that reason, 5 of us, 4 of whom are BJCP judges, agree it's the gold. So,
well, quite frankly, that was an experimental beer. So
right,
it's
exactly.
Very appropriate your choice.
Yeah, if they put it like we're putting this in stout, I'd be like, no, not on your life. But it's experimental, and it did exactly what it said it was, and it was like something I'd never had before. What's the argument?
Again, you get one liver, right? So if you enjoy it, that's what beer is for, is to find the beer that you like. And I think that's the best part about 8,000 craft breweries, is that there should be choice, right? Like you should have choice.
Going back to what you were talking about as far as the Reinheitsgebot laws, is that was actually, I mean, there's a great MBAA podcast just on this, and I wish off the top of my head I remembered the guy who did it. But he was talking about, because there was that debate going on actually in Congress where people were trying to get it passed almost in the U.S. in the mid to late 1800s, and up until the early 1900s, and it was almost a benefit to brewing that we were, Americans like their beer cold, and they wanted it clear, and we had 6-row barley here. So what does it do?
Corn.
They use corn with it,
Yeah.
and it created another style of beer. But you know what? It's fine. That's a good beer.
Yeah.
and you can do a lot with it. And had they been so dogmatic about what ingredients could be used in the beer, that style never would have come to fruition.
Yeah. And I guess we
Shout out
should
to the
ask
American Light Lager.
The American Light Lager. And, it has its place. And
the original craft beer.
well, some people say that.
Yeah.
Some people say that was the original craft beer.
Technically speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love a good craft light lager for sure.
Yeah, we did that.
Good one's a good one.
We had time. We reintroduced what's a landrace barley here. It's a 6-row barley called Atlas that the Spanish first brought over, and then some people, I know East Brother did it with some flaked corn, and oh my God, they did a pre-prohibition Pils that I wanted to drink all day and all night.
Yeah.
It was just too drinkable.
Yeah. And over in Oak Park Brewing, they bought the rights to People's Beer. Have you had that one yet? It's the first black-owned brewery in America. They went under in the 70s. They bought the original recipe and started brewing it, and it's phenomenal. It's so good. Like, I'm like, that should be in every bar in America. Like, it's so good. And it's like, just kick out those guys.
Get
and bring
Yingling
in this
off
one.
here, get Coolers off here. Let's get People's Beer on there.
People's Beer. I mean, it's a good name as
Yeah.
well.
Great name.
Yeah, exactly. But
No John Birch Society.
yeah, yeah. But also the future of beer. I mean, people are doing seltzers now. That's a thing people
Yeah.
enjoy.
It's fast growing. It's not going anywhere. It's only getting bigger.
Yeah. The low-cal stuff's happening. Non-alcoholic beer has come a long way in the
Gluten-free.
last 5 years.
Gluten-free. I've tasted some real good gluten-free. Almost going over to Buck Wild. I mean, one thing that they've tried to do. I mean, he's just starting, just getting his feet under his legs, but it's like, hey, I'm not even going to advertise that we're gluten-free. We're a brewery. We're making beer here from buckwheat, from millet, from rice, and we're going to focus just on. And that I think that has a point, because it is beer for everyone. Anyone can enjoy that.
Yeah.
But gluten-free is definitely another style that's coming on its way. I'm sorry, as seltzers. I don't know. Makes it
That's the
easy so
present. That was
people
the
can
last segment. We
drink
didn't talk
and
about it.
fine and dandy, but it's basically taking seltzer water and putting vodka in it. So why not just stick to the mixed drink category?
I've had a few good ones. I've had a few craft ones and a few macro ones that are solid. But it ultimately just feels like a vessel to get alcohol into your body faster.
Yeah. Without the bloat.
To the kids.
Right. Which I get people that are health conscious about calories and carbs, but it doesn't have the same satisfaction for me as beer does. I don't get anything close out of it that I do. For
Nothing
beer.
close.
I am a fuddy-duddy about that one. I just no.
Yeah.
It's
But I like the low ABV and I like the low cal.
that's
trend.
a good point.
I would
Good
love
point.
to see 4% pilsners even like
Oh,
that.
yes.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
Like why
Yes.
can't beers get lower ABV? I'm all
Absolutely.
about that.
Yeah.
That's health conscious. It's smart. You can have 4 then.
Yeah.
That's not health conscious, but you can still do it.
Yeah.
it's
Like Evil
enjoyable.
Twin has that bikini beer that's like 3.2%
Yeah.
or 2.7. I love it.
Totally.
And it's like great because you can just drink that all day literally because there's almost nothing to it.
Totally.
And again, non-alcoholics come a long way from burning
Sure
the
has.
alcohol out and
Yeah.
just making this disgusting caramel thing. So I think that's going to be something you just got to cater to everybody. And like you were saying, that brewery that's like, no, we're gluten-free, but we don't say that first. I was just talking to a brewery that does all locally sourced ingredients. They're like, we're a brewery first. We make good beer. And by the way, it's locally sourced. I think it's an important thing because you're an organic brewery. You know that if you lead with organic, it turns some people off to the idea that it can't be good.
It makes a preconceived
So true.
notion, right?
Yeah.
You just
And,
assume
and
what
at
it's
the
gonna
end,
be.
and at the end of the day, we're drinking beer because we enjoy the taste.
Yeah.
I mean, we want to feel good about it. Maybe we're looking for a cause. We'll try this one, or because we have an intolerance to gluten, we try another one. But yeah, at the end of the day, it has to taste good.
has to taste
Otherwise, who wants it?
Yeah.
You only get one liver.
I only get one liver.
What are you doing
I'm not
wasting
going
on
to
something you don't
experiment.
like?
Yeah. So the future of beer. Good beer.
Yeah.
Well-made beer, technically made beer for everybody.
For everybody.
Low alcohol, high alcohol. Let's get crazy with it in both directions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no sense in fighting trends. Trends are going to happen.
Yeah.
And actually maybe embrace it, but just don't think it's the forever trend.
Yeah. Be an admiral. Roll with the punches. Just do it.
Just do it.
All right. Yeah. We can't say you can't just repeat that. That's not allowed. I got to pay rights for licensing on that one. All right. We got to get out of here. We've been here far too long. Before we get out of here, though, so Phil, where can we find out more about Almanac?
You can go to almanacbeer.com. You'll find out about every beer we make. You can go to our Instagram page, Almanac Beer, everything that we release. We're at 651 West Tower Avenue is our brewery. We're right next door to the beautiful Malt House at 651A. They have their own restaurant and bar that serves their beer. So, come see us. See us both.
It's a great neighborhood because there's Almanacs right there, and you don't have to go very far. It's the same parking lot. We got all our picnic tables out there and everything. Where we just because we highlight the malt that's made. So many different breweries have their beers there, but that's next door. But it's kind of fun here on the island with distilleries, breweries, wineries, all
like a
within
block apart?
within
blocks?
half a mile,
Yeah.
third of a
pretty
mile,
cool.
something like that.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Got some St. George barrels aging with Admiral
yes.
Malt right now. That's
Yeah,
coming out maybe in
they
6
do.
months.
They do. They've got some really nice whiskeys there.
That's more future for you.
More
And,
future.
Ron Silberstein. Where can we find out more about Admiral Malting and the Rake?
Yeah, it's similar. You go to Admiral Maltings Maltings.com. That's with an SMALTINGS.com. And then, the Rake at Admiral Maltings. And we'll talk about our malt on there and what kind of styles, how it's made. But I agree with Phil. Come on down here if you can. If you can, to be able to tour a brewery. We had to get that going again soon. We once had that where people could tour your brewery, and then like an hour later we had a tour of the malt house, and that was just the whole package. But COVID, all that. We'll get that happening.
Coming soon or later. I don't know.
We'll see.
It's the future. We'll figure it out.
Please get your vaccinations.
Yeah,
get
your
vaccinations. I'm going right down the barrel on that one.
Absolutely.
Get them. All right, so this has been episode 125 of Barley and Me. You can find Barley and Me across social media at Barley and Me Pod. Don't forget to check out Chugs for Charity. Different charities every week. Get involved. Do your own Chugs for Charity. You can win free beer from me. I'm allowed to do that because I am not a brewery.
I love it.
Thank you guys so much. Ron Silberstein from Admiral Maltings, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Phil Emerson from Almanac Brewing, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thanks so much for watching. Get home safe.